Hi everyone, welcome back to part 2 of Mugwort's game analysis from the chess.com Crazyhouse Championship for 2018. So far I'm on 5 points out of 7, and this video will feature games from Crazyhouse legends such as JannLee, xuanet, helmsknight and HighContrast, plus many more. So let's jump into round number 8. And here I'm playing black versus Grandmaster Margency from Turkey. So this is my third Grandmaster in the event in 8 rounds. And I played Margency a couple of times in Bughouse, and he's on chess.com. He's not a bad Bughouse player at all. Quite proficient in all the basic themes and Bughouse tactics and so on. So let's get started. We have e4, e5, different move order, but transposing into a bishop e7 line. Fairly comfortable opening for black, even though it looks passive at the moment. A6, the intention here is to try to grab the bishop with knight a5 without allowing the bishop to sneak back via b5, a4 and c2. But good move, bishop b3, just preserving the bishop in case of knight a5. Let's keep going. Bishop g4, h3, bishop drops back. Rook e1, so I don't really want to get into a chess position against a grandmaster. We haven't had any trades so far, but his intention is to go knight f1, knight g3, knock the bishop away, perhaps lodge a knight into f5. King h8, yeah, wasn't quite sure about this move. It's not that easy to find a reasonable plan for black to improve the position. Perhaps bishop g6, knight h5, knight f4 was an idea. Just copying white's sort of plan. Knight f1, bishop g6. So here I think knight h5 was a move. I don't mind trading knights and bringing the bishop back to h5. Queen d7 is an attempt to control f5 again and to connect the rooks. But knight h4 is a very good move from my opponent, intending to land 2 knights into f5. So d5 opens a position, but I don't think this is a very good move. Perhaps he can trade once and stick a pawn on f5, for instance. But he's trading lots of pieces here and then putting a bishop back on e4. And I don't mind this because my next move is extremely accurate, queen to f7. Now this will make him waste time defending the square on f2. So perhaps, I don't know, rook e2, queen e2, dropping a knight somewhere to guard f2, pawn at f3, something like this. So it hands over the initiative to black, which I'm happy with. Knight to f3 is another choice, but then I start dropping with tempo. Pawn to f4, knight comes back to f1. It's funny that the computer wanted to play knight f1 here, just to... Maybe the computer realizes that a very important square to guard is f2. And I'm just going to keep hammering these dark squares. I'm quite happy with this move, bishop at d6, just reinforcing the pawn chain from the back. And the intention is to drop something on g3. Even if it's a knight, I don't care sacrificing a knight at some stage when I have better control over g3. One idea of this move is also to protect the pawn on e5 in case he chops a knight off on c6 and grabs e5. I don't think he wants to do it right now. What was my intention here? Perhaps taking on e5 once. Maybe bishop at h4, combined with ideas of f3 and trading off lots of pieces when the trades are good for black. And it looks like they are, or they will be pretty soon. Maybe bishop d6 also, and sticking a bishop in on g3, just to take over this diagonal and dominate the dark squares. So Margency instead played knight at g5, very, very aggressive. But I'm just dropping the queen back to g8. I could have traded once first, but this is also okay. d4 seems to favor black because the more pawns I trade, the better. So I'm sticking a pawn right back on g3. And as you can see, it's a critical square here on f2. I just want to trade as many diagonals as I can and keep putting them back on the board immediately. So pawn e6 is a mistake because I can take here, take on g5, and there's an immediate drop winning a piece with bishop at h4. So now I think black is just completely winning. Taking back on g5. Pawn at f7, I can leave the pawn there for a moment and just start dropping pieces on with check, and that's what happens. So knight at g1, king is on the run, dropping again here, dropping another knight, king b3. Now I need some more pawns. You can see I only have one pawn in hand at the moment. I'm going to need some more pawns for squares like b5 and c4. So now's a good time to sacrifice the rook on f7, take a third pawn in hand. So now I'm ready to drop on a4, b5, and so on. Bishop e6 just doesn't help at all. Pawn a4 check, b5 check, c4 check. He has to go in line with the bishop, and I finish off with knight c2 double checkmate, and that is it. So quite a clean game, I thought, with black. I was very happy with this one. I move on to 6 out of 8, and this is the start of a big streak. Let's move on to round 9. Okay, round 9 against Tom Hammerschmidt. All I knew about this player at this stage, he had a Ukrainian flag, and I didn't know at the time. I looked it up later, but the name apparently is a character from the US drama series called House of Cards. So I knew nothing about this player apart from that. Let's move on. Of course, in the end, he was one of the two players disqualified for violating the fair play rules. Okay, we have an e4, early d5. He also played this against JannLee, which I wasn't aware of at the time. Played my safer opening with knight c3. Knight f3, bishop g4. Played this opening a couple of times where my opponent's going to sack a queen with bishop takes f3, get two pieces for the queen, but I can drop the queen immediately on c8. Grab the pawn on c7, drop the queen back. And knight at c7 is very accurate because, as you can see here, there's a threat to take the bishop on d5. If the bishop drops back, I'm immediately winning a piece back with pawn at c7. And so it seems like knight at c7 is the only way to guard both the threats at the same time. All right, let's continue. Pawn at e4, pawn at c4 was another choice. I just want to make the bishop drop back and then put another pawn immediately on d5. So hitting the queen, and yeah, I thought it's the right time to give the queen back for two pieces. Take here, take there. We have a fork on d5, so he drops the queen back with check. I thought it was important to guard this pawn, so that's why I dropped a knight on e3. And it seems like his next move already is a mouse slip, pawn at f3. There seems to be no other logical explanation for this move. I'm assuming he meant pawn to f4, just attacking the knight, and then we're going to have a trade. Or maybe pawn takes back, he can win the knight back eventually. So, well, why not just take on c6? And here I really should attack the queen and break the pin on the e file. I should play knight at c4. And then when he goes back, I could probably just take on f3. Seems no reason why not. And maybe follow up with pawn at d5. Good thing about pawn at d5 first. In this position here. But there could potentially be some danger with knight at g4 and dropping a pawn on e2. So perhaps clearing the pawn away on f3 seems safer than dropping something on d5. And white has a very healthy advantage in this position. It has no real weaknesses. I mean, g2's covered twice already. There doesn't seem to be any easy way for black to come in. And notice the bishop here is blocked as well. Okay, where are we up to? So I played bishop g3, which is not the best move due to pawn at f4. I thought I could kick the queen away next with knight at c4, knight at c4, knight at d3. Knight c4, queen comes back. And now I decided to block with pawn at d6, which seemed like a very good idea at the time. But it turns out that knight takes pawn is better. It was a bit hard to understand this at the time, but I can follow this up with queen takes f3. I'm just trying to put immediate pressure on f4 here. So perhaps e5, breaking the pin on the knight, defending the knight. And it gets rather complicated here, the lines. Maybe bishop takes immediately. Take there, there's a queen e4 check, there's also knight at d5. He doesn't have any checks with the queen, and it looks like I can clean up the pawn on f4. And I have some very well placed knights in the center of the board, and it looks like this was the way to play. 3 pawns in hand. I'm not quite sure where the queen is going, but it seems like whatever I do, I'm gonna take on f4 with a threat at least to no, I'm dropping a knight here. I don't want to do that. Perhaps knight takes. Knight d4. I can defend c2 with tempo with queen e4 check, and then perhaps do some tricky interference. Pawn at d6, pawn at d5, something like this, and threaten the knight here on d4. It's just an example. It may not be the best moves. The way it went in the game is pawn at d6, followed by knight takes f4, take. And I was pretty amazed during the game that my opponent somehow managed to justify this mouse slip. And knight d4 is quite a tricky move because it looks like I can just take back with the pawn on f3. But then he might follow up pawn at e2, and this gets very tricky because if I take with the bishop, then there's a drop on g2 followed by a capture on f4, and this is no good for white. If I take with the queen, here I know it's a queen sacrifice, but again, bishop takes going to be followed by knight takes, knight at g2 check. I don't want to take with the king because this queen takes c4 check. I mean, yeah, this doesn't seem to be any good either. So pawn at e2 is a bit nasty. How do I avoid that? Well, I decided to drop a knight on d5. It looked like a good move at the time, but queen c5 is just very annoying. I don't really have a good response to this move. I thought for quite a long time for a solution because, yeah, again, there's threats of pawn at e2 as well as a knight hanging here for free. So I decided to play queen sacrifice, queen takes f3, which was declined. Well, what's happening? The point is after knight takes queen, pawn takes knight, he can't afford to take this because I have response knight at c7 check. And otherwise, the knights again are very well placed here on c4 and d5. Don't have any real weaknesses in my camp at the moment. So yeah, good decision. He's making all the right moves here. Knight takes c2 check. Knight takes rook. I only have 2 pawns in hand, so I thought it was quite important to guard the squares here. Not allow any more invaders with pawn at c2. So I played bishop d3. Yeah, a big spike I don't quite understand. He didn't find all the best moves here. He went pawn at c2, bishop takes. I was ready to respond if knight takes bishop with queen e4 check and queen takes knight. So he went queen takes c4 instead. I went rook e1 check, pawn at e5. Now, of course, I have to guard this bishop here, so queen d3 seems like a reasonable option. Just clear the queens off the board and then work out the best place to drop it back. So he took, bishop takes, rook at d7. Rather interesting move. So I guess he realized it was time to defend against knight at c7. He doesn't seem to have any attack. I've got all the important squares covered here. So rook at d7. Pawn at a6. I wasn't really sure the best way to make inroads here. With only 3 pawns and a queen, I need some sort of invasion on the light squares. It seems like a7, c6, a6, c6 are the most sensitive squares for black at the moment. e6 doesn't seem to work. Thought about sacrificing a bishop on e5, take with the rook. He'll drop something on e6. And I wasn't quite sure where this is going, so I don't really need 5 pawns in hand, do I? Pawn at a6, rook c8, good move. I really have to keep an eye on these squares here, where the rook is controlling. I didn't see any immediate threats, so pawn takes b7. One interesting line is if he sacrifices a rook, I take back. You can check a few times with knight at b3, but take, king d1, queen at c1, king e2, and I really wasn't sure, but I thought I would be safe after a move like knight at d4, king f1. I have e2 covered, and sacrificing the queen. To make this work, he would need an extra knight in hand for c2, which he doesn't have, of course, or f3. And otherwise, I seem to have everything covered. So, what happened in the game was a defensive move with rook takes b7, another pawn drop, distracting the rook from the back row, rook takes pawn, queen a8 check. Queen c8, again, he's finding all the right defensive resources here for black. Take, queen a4 drop, queen back. Pawn at c6 doesn't work, so I have to prepare this with pawn at b5. Seemed like a good idea. Knight at c5, again, perfect move. It somehow works out. After pawn at c6, we can trade queens. Now I take a pawn ready for c6. Rook takes c1. This doesn't seem to be the right time to sacrifice a rook on c1, as mentioned before. And it gets very tricky here because he can take the bishop on e5, allow a check, block on e6. Otherwise, yeah, he's got to find some way to increase the pressure on the c file. And I wasn't quite sure how that's possible. We're into a time scramble here. So I'm down to less than 10 seconds. I think my opponent's still got around 15 to 20 seconds left. So it seems to be a big turning point. He sacrificed the rook, king takes back, and now knight takes b2. All right, I've got to pause here for a moment and reflect on this move. Knight takes b2. What do you think about this move? In my mind, this is an attempt to flag because I'm under 10 seconds. In fact, I think I've only got about 7 seconds left. And I have to find a forced mate. But, okay, I could see it as a challenge to find a forced mate. But honestly, this move, knight takes b2, is one of the worst flagging attempts that I have ever seen in my life. Knight takes b2, what is this? I mean, it's certainly not an engine move. It doesn't seem to be a mouse slip. I mean, where else is the knight destined for? c3? c5? These moves don't make any sense either. It's not a check. And obviously I'm not going to take the knight back. That would be a bit silly. Although bishop takes is quite reasonable because it's a discovered check. So I'd be quite impressed if anyone can explain this move, knight takes b2, because I just don't get it. Well, shall we move on? Maybe it's an alien move. It's not a human move. Maybe this is why Tom Hammerschmidt was banned for fair play violations. I don't have any other logical explanation here. Knight takes b2 just makes absolutely no sense at all. And if you wanted to flag me, yeah, why not throw in a few checks? Knight at b3, knight takes b3, queen at c1, queen takes d2, queen takes rook, and so on. All right, so knight takes b2. Let's move on. Bishop takes d6 check. Queen at c8 check. We're moving very fast here. Queen at d8. Now here what I might do, just for your entertainment, is to go back to the chess.com website, where we have this position here after queen at d8 from my opponent. And you can see the moves left. I'm just circling the mouse around. So Tom has got 10 seconds. I've got 4 seconds left. And I have to find a force mate in seconds, otherwise I lose. Here we go. Queen takes queen, check. Rook takes, knight c7, check. King d7. I have 1.5 seconds left. Queen at c6, king c8 is forced. Rook at a8. I have 0.3 seconds left. My opponent has 8 seconds. He drops a piece on b8. I did not notice I have 2 pawns in hand for mate in 1. I pre-moved knight takes bishop check. 0.2 left on the clock. He drops on c7 and queen takes checkmate with 0.1 seconds left on the clock. Oof. Bear in mind that chess.com, I believe, has a minimum move time of 0.1 seconds. So if the game lasted one more move, then I'm gone. I lose on time. So massive relief to win that game. Extremely happy. If this was a bug house game, I'd be going, yes, 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 spamming my partner with yes, yes, yes. Cake, cake, they suck, they suck. All right. Yeah, huge relief to get away with that one in a time scramble where I was forced to find a mate in 7 or whatever it was. Okay, so what's the story here? I move on to 7 out of 9. I must be in about 3rd or 4th place at the moment. We move on to round 10. Okay, so my opponent here is Terra87. From Russia, reasonably well-known player on Lichess. I've played him quite a number of times. He always starts out 1d4, and I always seem to be black against him. I have a reasonable record, but he has beaten me a few times, so he's quite a dangerous opponent. Okay, so d4. I play my usual Dutch defense with f5. I've been playing this for a few months, and I have something prepared against Terra. So what I'm going to do here is not make too many comments. This game is for your entertainment, and I'm going to entitle it The Four Horsemen for obvious reasons. Four Horsemen is a Metallica song. I'm a bit of a metalhead myself. And there's a line that goes, choose your fate and die. So you'll see what I mean when we come up to that point in the game. All right, knight c3, bishop g5, e6, e4. Now this is one of the very sharpest lines that I know in any variation, because I'm prepared to sack a queen on move 5, and I'm not sure what the fastest queen sack is in Crazyhouse. I'm prepared to make a claim for the fastest queen sack in 5 moves. I'm not sure. Maybe there's a queen sack in 3 or 4 moves. I haven't seen it yet. Okay, bishop takes, bishop b4 check. I'm trying to grab a pawn in hand at the right time. So c3, very important to get the move order correct here. There was a previous game where I played bishop takes c3 too early. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't work so well, because if I want to play pawn at e3, oops, there's a mate on e7 with the queen drop. So I have to make sure the bishop is still on the board, protecting against the mate. So my move in the game is pawn at e3. Now, I don't think my opponent has seen this before. He took on e3. As you can see, I only have a knight in hand, and knight on f2 is just going to be way, way, way too slow. He'll play queen h5 and just crash through with a drop on g7 or something. It's knight at f2 just doesn't threaten the king. I have to play pawn at f2. And of course, to grab a pawn in hand, it looks very risky to allow mate on e7, but I'm doing everything with check. So, check here, drop with check. I'm glad I didn't have auto queen on, so I'm promoting to a knight with check. Now this is reminiscent, if you know chess openings. There's an opening in the queen pawn, queen's gambit, counter gambit called the Alban counter gambit. And there's a variation which involves taking on g1 with check, under promoting to a knight, and then white ends up playing king e1. And you can actually keep 3 knights in normal chess on the board. And I was kind of hoping my opponent would play king e1, even though it's a good move anyway, but just for entertainment. He played rook takes knight. Alright, so here we go. Knight takes pawn check, king d2. And the reason I'm not going into too many variations here, because there's just so many possible king walks. I'm going to check him lots of times. He can go to d3, he can go to f2, he can go to f3. It's just too hard to analyze all the variations, so let's just follow the game. Knight at e4 check, king c2. Now, of course, I have to cover e7 if I'm doing a non-check move. So, although I could have dropped a knight on b4, it's just going to be loose after king b3, so I decided to play a safer move, knight c6. Now, it's funny I say safer move because probably not too many people would play the way I do. And it was very funny to see JannLee stream where someone on Twitch actually commentated, probably because they were watching my game later on against JannLee. They commentated, Mugwort is a boring positional player. And yeah, I mean, using this game as an example, what do you think? Going to sleep in this game? Checkmate threats everywhere, 4 knights on the board, queen sack after move 5, kings running around the board. What do you think? It's a boring positional game? Anyway, I'm half joking, but let's just get on with it. Bishop at h5 check. King takes bishop. Yeah, pretty happy with that. Wasn't really sure what Terra's follow-up would be. Whether he was going to bother defending the queen or saving the king. It's just so complicated. Very, very, very difficult to analyze this position. A pawn at f7. Obvious threat of queen dropping on e8. Am I going to bother defending the threat? Absolutely not. Let's go for it. Knight b4 check. King b3. Now, the key to my sequence of drops here, with check, of course, is that I really want to take on d1 with a check. So that's the whole key to the position. If I have a queen in hand, it shouldn't take too much effort to work out a force mate. So knight at d2 check is accurate. I thought giving away one of the 4 horsemen, but it doesn't matter. a5 check, there's no choice for Terra. Pawn at b4 check. Now knight takes queen with check. Right, so again, there's just no choice. He can't take on d1 because of an instant checkmate with queen at c3. So he's got to play king c2. Now dropping the queen on c3 is probably not the fastest mate because of king takes knight. And this knight, as you can see, is just getting in the way. Now, of course, the queen belongs on d2. So this wasn't the best way to do it. I played a better move, which is knight takes e3 check. Now I have a drop on c4, and I'm going to end with a queen drop on f2. So this is totally forced. And that is it. So one of my better games. I thought I was extremely happy with this game from start to finish. And I don't know, hope you enjoyed it. Now, you could say this is the reason why I play the Dutch. The game against helmsknight, which we look in a few games' time, is a reason why I shouldn't play the Dutch, but do anyway because of games like this. And of course, I have to work hard finding some improvements against the h4, h5, h6 attack, which we're going to see later on. But for now, what was that, round 10? So I'll move on to 8 out of 10. Let's go on. Okay, big game. maybe the most important game of my life, round 11 against world Crazyhouse champion JannLee. Okay, so taking white against JannLee is always preferable, of course. And you notice I've got white against some of the Crazyhouse experts like Opperwaisen. Next round also against xuanet, against Vempeli, against JannLee. And I think this really worked in my favor. So this might be familiar to those of you who watched the part 1 video, because this game is reminiscent of round 7 against M. Michael with reverse colors. I'm taking the white side. Early bishop c5, knight takes pawn, knight c6, and here I play probably the most aggressive, sharpest line with knight takes f7. Okay, so queen f6 pretty much instantaneously. And I actually completely forgot my preparation here. I was ready because I was preparing this from the black side. Now, of course, also I wanted to know the way to play it from the white side. And I was assuming that nobody would prepare this and know the best line, which is d4, bishop takes, and pawn at e3. Now this line is extremely safe for white. White will have absolutely no problems, whatever black does. You can see here that f2 and e3 are completely rock solid. The sacrifices just don't work at all. Black will probably have to take on f7, trade here, and yeah, look at this. Everything is so well protected. White is a healthy pawn up. Has easy development, knight c3, bishop, maybe g5, bishop b5, or bishop d3 when d5 is protected. I could drop a pawn on d5, could drop a bishop on d5, whatever I want. It's pretty easy to play this position with white. Not too much can go wrong. So of course, I just played an automatic knee-jerk reaction move. In this position here, queen to f3. Now, I guess I was fortunate this move doesn't lose by force, because if I'm allowing sacrifices on f2 followed by queen exchanges and king takes knight, this sort of thing, I got to be fortunate this doesn't lose by force. And I suppose here I'd play bishop c4. The idea is to make him drop some pieces so he has less to attack with. So the only real threat here is knight at g4, and I suppose I could just drop a bishop here. If g6, perhaps, yeah, just drop the bishop back here to f3. It doesn't seem to be any big danger for white's king. Yeah, I gotta watch out for queen d4, so perhaps this wasn't the best way to do it. Yeah, I do have to be more careful. Take back requested. Could start with bishop at f3. Yeah, maybe the bishop just doesn't belong here on c4 at all. Bishop at f3. Alright, covering these two knight drops here. Yeah, I suppose there's always knight f6, still retaining the same threats. Bishop c4, pawn at e6. Now, can I cover queen at d4 and g4 or f2 at the same time? This is what I'll be looking at here. I don't know. Maybe I should just make the first move that comes into my head. Queen at e2. It's probably no good because of knight d4. King e1? Can I do king e1? Maybe. Can I leave it as a maybe? Yeah, I mean, with only a knight and queen in hand, surely nothing can go wrong here. D4. cover these squares? Queen at d3. I'd really like to reach a point where I can just say, okay, white's safe, and let's go back to the game. All right, yeah, not so easy after all. But this is a sort of thing I was expecting during the game, and perhaps I was a little bit fortunate to get away with king takes f7 from JannLee, because now I can go back to the main tactical point of knight takes f7, which is to win the bishop back on c5 with a check and a fork. So now I'm very happy with this opening, the way it turned out. So king, whatever, doesn't matter. Take the bishop back, d6, queen c3. I don't think there's really any point looking at too many variations here, because white is 2 pawns up, and on the next few moves I'm just making sure that I'm not falling for any cheap traps. So knight d4, there's some threats on c2 and f3, and the safest move here is bishop at d1. And from here, as long as I just start dropping pawns around the king, there's not that much that can go wrong immediately. So c5, just overprotecting the knight on d4. Pawn at f3, guarding against some sort of shooter threats, but the idea here is to play pawn at e3 and just not allow even any vague possibility of a drop on f3 or anything like that. So knight comes back. Okay, so I have a very safe position. I'm 2 pawns up. How do I continue from here? Because if I start developing the bishop on c4, maybe bishop like this, he's going to drop an attack on g2, the new weakness here. If I go rook g1, no, it could allow something like queen g6 or queen g5. And I've got to be a bit careful. I mean, I'm sure it's okay, maybe just g3, but I didn't want to give JannLee anything because I'm sure you know he's a magician. He can make something out of nothing. That's one of his favorite sayings. So knight to a3. It looks like a nothing move, but there is a target on d6, and I would like to play knight c4 next and target d6. So d5, yeah, good way to make progress for black. He wants to bring the knight here with tempo. Queen trade here on f6 possible, but doesn't change things too much, because as you can see, the queen just doesn't have any excess points at the moment. So knight b5, I was very happy also with this move, because once the knight reaches d6, if JannLee allows it, it is hard to cover these queen drops on e8 and f7. And I thought his next move made a lot of sense with knight at f7. Just keeping the knight at bay for the moment. So we have some trades. Bishop c4, queen at g5. Yeah, the most aggressive move, queen at g5. Otherwise the knight probably just had to drop back somewhere and allow some more trades. Some options here, but queen at g3 is the safest move, and of course if take here, it just helps me to open the f file. Now the double pawns on the g file, double pawns on the f file here are just completely rock solid. I would even say diamond solid. There is just no way through for black, and with an extra pawn in hand, I can choose what to do. Pawn at e4, pawn at f5, yeah, or whatever opens up the diagonal for the bishop. Okay, so bishop d7. The knight's just going to come back. Any trades here I'm very comfortable with. For instance, knight takes, pawn takes. Yeah, it's just going to help me open up the bishop here, maybe e4 later on. Alright, so knight comes back. Knight e4, queen f5. So I'd like to drop something on d6. I decide to trade knights first, stick a knight here. queen d5, take there, stick it right back. King e7. The next move, d4. Now we're down to under 30 seconds here each. So I wanted to transition the game from positional into a tactical finish, and I didn't want to end the game in a 5-second time scramble like I've had a couple of times already this tournament. And d4 is probably not the best move because, I mean, he can maybe take again with either piece. I did want to open up the bishop, take advantage of f6 only being guarded by the king. Wasn't quite sure how it would work. It was more of a feeling, intuition type move. d4, take, open up the bishop. But rook g8, I was definitely prepared to meet this with knight takes pawn, and I was really confident here. No matter what happens, whether he took the queen, whether we swap queens this way, or whether he took the bait with the king, that this would either lead to a forced checkmate or I would have such a decisive attack he'd be defending for the rest of the game. And I thought I did have enough to checkmate. So it's absolutely critical here to find the key move queen e5, which I saw about 2 or 3 moves in advance. The swap is forced, take here. Again, essential to preserve the knight, because the knight and the queen form a deadly duo. They're extremely potent together. Again, important I drop the right piece. I don't want to start with the queen because then the knight and queen are just not so good when the king starts running this way. I need to keep the knight for d6 in case he runs this way, so queen at f7, and then the knight finishes off on d6. So this is one of the key variations. There's not that much else to calculate here. If the king goes anywhere else, it's still queen at f6, and there is a mate on g4, end of game, that is it. They covered the last 2 or 3 moves on the chess.com stream, but of course, big surprise for the commentators. I guess it was a big surprise for everybody. What did Aman say on his stream? Arsey beats Arsey. Don't call me Arsey, bro. I'm an Aussie. Aussie beats Aussie. I don't think my play was too arsey in that game. Okay, let's move on. Of course, very happy. And the key to beating JannLee, which is just about impossible in most games, but right here, 0 blunders. I'm very happy with that. 0 blunders. So 2 pawns up in the opening, just held it for the whole game, and I was really happy with the finish. And I think the whole thing worked out with knight takes f6 and queen e5 check. Alright, so that puts me on 9 out of 11, leapfrogging JannLee to 2nd place, just behind little Plotkin, who's still leading with 9.5 out of 11? I think that's right, because he dropped a game, had a draw with JannLee, which was very exciting, by the way. You can check out JannLee's stream, which I thoroughly recommend. Let's move on to round number 12. Okay, so 2 whites again in a row. Can't complain about this. Thank you, chess.com, for the excellent pairings you're providing me with. So white against xuanet, a very experienced Bughouse and Crazyhouse player from Fix and Lichess. So my record against xuanet is probably a little bit in the black, a few minus, but it's not bad. I mean, I'm close to 50% against xuanet. My games against him, because I guess we have a kind of similar style, although the game against JannLee wasn't so typical of my style. Just make a wall of pawns and defend and hold everything and just slowly push him off the board. My style is more like the game 2 rounds ago against Terra, where I'm just throwing pieces at the opponent. Don't mind sacking a queen, sacking pieces for the initiative. And yeah, just going for it. Wild complications. I'm totally at home with wild complications. The more the better. And xuanet has exactly the same style, so I do really enjoy the matches I have against xuanet. And often when we play a series on Lee chess, we'll both comment to each other, oh, they were funny games, queens flying everywhere, we're both sacking queens. It's almost a battle of who can sack their queen first. Yeah, I'm not sure who sacks the queen in this game. Maybe not. I think we have a queen swap. Anyway, let's get on with it. e4, d5. Take. I've seen this a few times. Okay, what is this? e5 on move 3. Now, I used to play this in Bughouse with black. I gave it up after, I think, Firefly came up with a good response. And I can't remember what it was right now. It was either knight f3, queen e2, or maybe it was bishop e5, bishop b5, and queen e2, something like this. And the idea in Bughouse is to ask your partner for a pawn or a knight. You want to take on e5 with check, and then drop something immediately on c7. And already black is pretty much busted out of the opening, so I don't think top players go like this anymore with black. Now, I've never seen it in Crazyhouse. I assume it's not very good, but xuanet's just trying to take me out of my comfort zone in 3 moves already. Alright, what did I do? Knight f3, pretty standard move, can't be bad. And knight takes pawn. Thought I might swap knights, drop the knight back, kick the queen. Must be good to gain a tempo or two. Now, if I had this position again, I would go knight g5 followed by d4, saving the knight here. And this is a good way to take over the square d4, because in the game I could possibly have a problem with him dropping a knight, for instance, on d4, especially if I ever want to play the move queen e2 to counteract the black queen along the e-file. So, and you can see here white's very obvious advantage in development. I can follow up with bishop c4, hitting f7, trying to make him play a passive move like pawn e6, which I'm always very happy against xuanet. If ever he plays a passive move, I breathe a sigh of relief. Okay, in the game I played queen e2. Maybe not the best move, because it does give him some opportunities to attack on c2, perhaps knight at b4, or I'd have to play a move like d3. He went knight at d4 instead, but after these trades I can follow up with knight d5, and I think the position is already critical. It might already be losing for black. And now of course he has to deal with the threat on c7. Trading queens just doesn't really help much. Bishop d6. Now the problem is here, the squares f7 and g6 are critically weak, terminally weak, I would say. Now of course every Bughouse player knows the standard pattern with knight at h5. I decided not to do this because rook g8, well, I think this would end up good for white anyway. I could even play knight f6 using the pin immediately. Take, some king move. Swap queens, queen to e8, this sort of thing. Was that forced? Maybe he could play king d8. Knight takes. I mean, obviously white has a very healthy material advantage. Was there any other ways for him to guard g7? He can't drop the bishop back. The bishop's tied to c7. Knight at f5. I really don't think this is going to work out very well. Maybe swap queens and drop the queen somewhere to cover g7. Something like queen at g5. Also hits d5 in case of d3. That's the point. So I'm not quite sure. I mean, I didn't have to go for this anyway. I already found a better line, so let's revert to that. Okay, so after bishop d6, a key move here is pawn h6, and I thought this was a much better move than knight at h5. There's really not many choices here for xuanet. Of course, if pawn takes, there's an immediate drop on g7. And and pawn e7 is an attempt to cover the square on f6. So after take, rook g8. Now it looks like f6 is covered twice, but in chess I think we call this a half pin, where there are two pieces in between the white queen and the black king. And here I can easily distract one of them with a drop on f6, really forcing a capture. So this opens up the e-file, and of course now I can take a second time. So this wins a ton of material, picking up the rook on g8, and I also have threats of promotion after the knight hops away. So the only thing I had to make sure of here is that he doesn't have a forced mate with knight at d3 check, knight at c2 check, queen takes queen. But as you can see, once the bishop takes, the rook is covering e1, and he just doesn't have enough pieces to follow up. So, I mean, what else? He tried it anyway, but it doesn't work. Check here, king d1, knight takes rook. There is no immediate threat for xuanet, so can do whatever I want. I mean, even in the worst case, if I do a mouse slip, let's say I play rook at rook at g3. I mean, even in the worst case, I can answer queen takes queen with king takes, and I think even this would be safe. I mean, okay, I'm joking, of course. I'm not going to play rook at g3. But I can't even see a force mate here. Rook there, king takes, knight there. I can run to c2. Alright, so I thought rook at e8 check was the most forcing move, and it seems like all the captures work out for white. I'll just show you one example. If queen takes, I have queen takes, king takes, knight at f6, followed by queen dropping on e8 with checkmate. And surely king takes is even worse because, yeah, same thing, knight drop, queen drop here. Alright, so the only move is king d7. I could take the queen with check, but the king is running out this way. There's no obvious force mate in that case, so I just decided to pick up maximum material. Rook takes queen, pawn takes, knight f6 check, forcing the king out this way. There might be some mate with pawn at b5, but I thought queen e4 was a way to at least involve the onboard queen before I start dropping extra pieces. And if he drops a rook here, I can always take it with check at the right time, which is what happened. So queen there, rook drop, pawn drop, and now I'm going to take the rook with check, just for some extra material in hand. Okay, now it's a force mate. Knight there, pawn b4, and rook at a3. So, very clean game from start to finish, no big mistakes. There was a little moment perhaps around here where knight at b4 was better for black, because I can't exchange a knight on d4, and I've got to work out a way to cover the square c2. So, for example, pawn to d3. And the game continues. Pawn at d4, pawn at g4, perhaps. Oh no, he's got to watch out for this. But on the other hand, the queen is tied to c2, so yeah, perhaps pawn at d4 is okay. Knight here, knight a6, this sort of thing. All right, so what's that mean? 10 out of 12. I have just won 5 games in a row. 10 out of 12 takes me, well, still in second place. Little Plocken has always had the lead since the beginning of the tournament. He's on 10.5. Well, let's see if I can catch him. Round 13. I finally get a black against helmsknight. So I know helmsknight quite well from Bughouse on Fix. She's a very well-known Bughouse player, also has started streaming. And I haven't played her too many times in Crazyhouse, maybe only 2 or 3 times. But of course she's going to know all the typical Bughouse, Crazyhouse themes. They are like cousins, Bughouse and Crazyhouse. Of course, there's some extra skills in Bughouse that you need, such as insane speed, coordination with your partner, watching the other board, communication, hitting the right buttons at the right time. It's helpful to have a Skype connection with your partner for an advantage in speed and communication and so on. Okay, so black against helmsknight, round 13. Here we go, d4. Now, she can play anything, so I'm not really expecting anything in particular. Let's stick to f5, knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4. So playing a sort of London setup, I guess. So I was expecting, something like e3, bishop d3, maybe c3, knight d2, this sort of thing. e6, e3. Okay, in hindsight, I would probably throw in a check with a bishop. And also it's an idea to delay castling. And now there were some games in the recent Lichess Crazyhouse World Championship from only a couple of days ago, where it was Dampu versus Arca 50, who's a Grandmaster, also the Atomic World Champion from last year, 2017. He's not a bad Crazyhouse player, and there were some games involving bishop b4 check, c3, bishop comes back. Some games Arca castled, I think some games he delayed castling. And Dampu just threw this pawn up the board, h4, h5, h6. And in the end, Arca played h6 just to prevent this attack. Now, one of the problems black faces in this opening is that the white king is extremely safe. And it's just impossible for black in the opening to get anything going against the white king. So black really needs to make sure, after making this weakening move f5, that white can't just blow black off the board. And in hindsight, after this game, I mean, even though you can see down here a centi-pawn loss of 45 is probably enough to defeat most players in the world with either color 95% of the time. And if you're playing black in Crazyhouse and your opponent has a 9 centi-pawn loss, not 9 pawns, that's 9/100ths of a pawn compared to the engine's best move, you just can't compete with that. So yeah, I mean, what to say? It was just a perfect game from helmsknight. And what it really means is I didn't provide enough practical problems for her over the board to solve. And she was just playing, 1 or 2 seconds of move, just playing the standard attacking moves. Knight c3, bishop here, knight e5, h4, h5, h6, hack, sack, mate. And I just didn't have any semblance of counterplay in the whole game. And I'm not going to offer too much commentary here. Enjoy the game. Enjoy seeing Mugwort getting blown off the board and completely destroyed in 20 moves or whatever. Alright, so this is for your entertainment as well. Bishop e7, knight c3, castles. Too early for castling, but okay, we'll show you what happened. b6, h4. I don't really have a good answer to this. h5 is just too weakening on the square here. She'll just chuck a knight in and keep it there forever. Bishop b7, h5. I do really need to play one of the following moves, either knight g4 or h6. Yeah, I can't do the defense I did in the game, as you're about to see. So let's just get on with it. And of course, a comment about h6. Of course, it weakens the square g6. The knight's going to pop into here. But I can at least hope to avoid making too many trades. And just, play rook f7, d6, knight d7. Just try and hold on for the moment. And yeah, so sort of leave the knight here and hopefully not trade off too many pieces. As I said before, the problem is I just don't have any counter-attack against the king, and that's why this is very easy for white to play. I really need to think about this more, what to do next time. Alright, so let's go back to the game. Knight e4, big mistake, because as I mentioned, I'm sure already, trades favor white. White wants as many trades as possible without going too crazy and sacrificing a piece like this. But white is very happy to trade bishop for knight at the right time. But she just ignores it. h6, good move. Don't have a choice here. I think I have to play g6. Take there, knight e5. Alright, where's the threat? Where's the threat? I'm panicking. I'm spending a lot of time here as well. So I decide to play bishop at h8. Because I thought the key squares to cover were f6 and g7. It turns out I was totally wrong. The key squares are h7 and g6. And it was probably a lot safer to play bishop at e8 instead. And at least make white work for the win. There's certainly no force mate from here for white. And yeah, the game goes on. I'm not sure how helmsknight would proceed. Maybe try and swap a pawn with f3, something like this. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, after f3 play a rook takes and bishop here, clean up the pawn. But I just can't afford to trade a rook. She'll drop here, and then there's mate threats on f7, this sort of thing. So, yeah, a big problem that I just can't trade too many pieces. Alright, go back to the game. Bishop at h8, knight takes, pawn at g7, just winning the piece back immediately. Take. I don't really have a better option here. King is on the run. Knight there, king e8. Yeah, or what to say. She's just playing all the natural moves. With the bishop and rook in hand, computer is calling mate in 10. Did she find it? Bishop there, bishop takes pawn. Alright, not a forced mate, but it really doesn't matter. It's just too hard to cover these squares here. And even if I do, yeah, I'll be defending for the rest of the game. Also, rook h7 is coming. Once she gets a pawn on f7, rook at e8 is just about unstoppable. So it's completely lost. Knight at g5 was some attempt, but pawn on f7 anyway. Oh, it's a disaster. Knight c6 sacking the queen, but she's just got too much material. Take her there. And knight is very useful because now there's mate threats of knight there, queen there, rook there. And I didn't bother to stop it, but there's nothing else I can do because there's also queen here to cover. What can I do? Knight there, king there, e8, and it's a forced mate. Grabbing a bishop, sticking it back on e5, and that is it. All right. So well played, helmsknight. It's one of the most convincing victories with the white pieces that I have ever seen. And no mistakes, no blunders. What can I say? I have to work hard on finding some improvements. All right, so let's move on. My score has been hampered. My streak has been broken. I'm now on 10 out of 13. Only 2 rounds to go. I think I was in about 4th place at the moment. JannLee has overtaken me again. Okay, let's move on to round 14. So black against another person with a Ukrainian flag called Easy Luck. I'm not going to say too much. I didn't have a comfortable feeling playing this player. Let's put it that way. Let's go on. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop B5, D6. If I had this position again, I would probably go for the Berlin with knight F6. And yeah, What would it be? A 4 knights. I'm not sure whether castling. Maybe castling is a good move also. Knight takes pawn. This is some chess theory here. I have no idea if it's any good in Crazyhouse or not. What would happen here? D4 in chess. Should I take there, or what's the theory? No, I go knight d6, don't I? Take there, pawn takes pawn. Knight f5. Alright, this can't be good for black, trading queen so early. Yeah, maybe bishop g5 here, rook d1. And white will look for ways to take advantage of these dark square weaknesses here. Maybe dropping a pawn on d6 at the right time. That was a bit of a joke. I don't think I'm really going to play this way. But where would I deviate? It's an interesting question. Really don't know the answer. Maybe sack a piece. What about pawn takes pawn, rook e1, pawn at e3? Yeah, this. Well, it's not even a piece sack. I was thinking about d5 and allowing pawn at d3 next. Just making sure I'm safe. Bishop here. That allows queen takes pawn. Really not sure. Pawn at f6, pawn at e5 to follow something like this. Just build a wall, make a barrier, try and stop his early attack. What else? But yeah, pawn at e3 is also an interesting option here. With trying to get into f2, of course. Alright, this did not happen. I played d6 in the game. Knight c6, knight f6, knight c3, knight f6, d4. Take. What else? Bishop d7, pretty much forced. Take there, castle. Alright, I'm not sure whether you saw the game in part 1 against Chicken Crossroad. It's a familiar theme here. I'm trying to set up bishop at b6. Bishop takes knight, pawn at h3, deflecting the pawn, and follow up with a knight drop on f3. So, what was I expecting here? Perhaps something like knight to f5. What else is a possible move? Pawn to h3, pawn at h3. Rook e1 doesn't seem to work. Knight at g5 is another choice, just to cover the square here. Well, let's see. Yeah, knight at g5. I think this is a good move from white. Now, I played pawn at h3 anyway. I think this turned out okay for black. And one idea is if he grabs the pawn here. Well, there's actually two ideas. One is to chase the knight away with h6. And if the knight moves anywhere, including sacrificing on f7, of course I follow up with knight f3 check. And if knight goes back to f3, then bishop takes h3. And it seems to work out well for black. The other idea is just to take the pawn immediately. And of course ideas if the knight takes on h3, knight f3 check. So I'm really not sure what should happen here. Pawn at g2 is common. To move the king over to a white square, then this check doesn't work. And it can never work unless I can force the king back. So what should I do from this position? Maybe pawn at e5, knight here. Don't know whether I really want to attempt a sacrifice by playing h6. Looks a little bit too loosening. And I also don't know whether I want to play queen e7. Yeah, I've got to watch out for a bishop drop here. So, yeah, what was the other choice? Not sure whether I really have a choice. Or could I drop the bishop back to d7 perhaps? Looks a little passive, but I'm not sure. It all depends on whether this sacrifice works or not. So he doesn't have a knight in hand. And a bishop drop from a distance. Yeah, king e7, pawn e5. I don't know. I really don't know whether black is going to be safe here or not. Take there, pawn drops. So again, without a knight in hand, not that easy, but I guess he's got bishop g5, take there, knight drop, and stuff like this. And if it is survivable for black, it's extremely uncomfortable. And I would not like to take black here. Maybe it's possible to survive with pawn at g6 or pawn at f7 and running the king back this way, but very uncomfortable. Okay, go on with the game. So, easy luck played. Bishop at c4. There's an obvious threat here on f7. So, queen e7. Now, I don't mind if he takes with the bishop or the knight. Doesn't matter. Because I'm always going to follow it with pawn takes g2, followed by knight at f3 check. And it seems to work quite well for black. Let's see what happened in the game. Pawn at b7. Okay, rook comes across. Now this pawn somehow magically, I don't know how, but easy luck in about 6 or 7 moves time, managed to promote this pawn into a queen. And somehow managed to cover the square b8. I still like blink my eyes and wonder how that happened, but I'm flabbergasted. Anyway, let's get on with the game. Pawn takes pawn. Knight at e5. Alright, so it's a key moment here. I can actually get away with this opening and not even be too much worse if I play the move h6. It's a very important move. At this moment, at this exact moment, I don't have another chance after this. So it's already decisive after I make this mistake with knight at e5. And as mentioned many times before, I'm prompting the knight to move or provoking the knight to move to gain access to f3. And if he comes back to f3 with a knight, which I would probably expect, then, I mean, the obvious move is bishop takes pawn. And I'm even looking at moves such as knight at e5 with the idea of trading and then with the threat of knight at f3. I'm not sure which works out better. But yeah, certainly bishop takes pawn can't be bad for black. In the game, knight at e5 looked like a safe way to make some vague threats here, cover f7, so it seemed like a reasonable human move, but now I just get completely destroyed. Watch this. Pawn at g2. Okay, surprised me a bit, but I guess it makes some sense. h6, one move too late, unfortunately. Queen takes knight. Okay, what is this? What is this move? Queen takes knight. I just did not understand that move at all. Okay, let's continue. Pawn takes queen. Maybe I could have taken on g5. And I wasn't sure. I mean, I thought it was risky to allow a sack here where the king has to take. Pawn drop on g6, swap queens, and so on. And I can't say for sure whether I'm getting away with that or not. I was just worried about being force mated at this stage. So I thought pawn takes queen was safest. Bishop takes, queen takes, knight takes. Now, if I go king takes, I'm calculating what happens if pawn drop. It doesn't seem like I'm getting force mated. But after this sequence, somehow I'm allowing this pawn to queen, and I realize now queen at the idea is queen at b3 would check, and I mean, if you saw this idea, you would probably play it immediately, But in hindsight, of course, it allows bishop at e6. I'm just so surprised this whole sequence of moves somehow strings together. Because pawn at f5 sets up multiple threats at the same time. But most importantly, it sets up the move queen at b3, promoting the pawn, while simultaneously avoiding the defense with bishop at e6. And I did not really understand this move at the time, I have to say. Yeah. So, in hindsight, what should I have played? Maybe king e8? Is that possible? Am I getting force mated? Is it a mate in 15? Can he grab a pawn in hand for f7? I don't know whether bishop takes h6 works, but if it does, then I'm dead instantly. Maybe I could. Yeah, if I drop a bishop, he's just going to go pawn at g6. Yeah, I mean the idea, just to show it on the board, is bishop takes. Now white would calculate if pawn at g6 is mating immediately. Queen there, king e7. He has a knight in hand only remaining. Sometimes you can play moves like knight at c8, but there seems like there's too much defense at the moment. d5 looks like it's covered also. So maybe even queen at b3 now. Oh dear. Now, how am I going to cover pawn drop here, knight drop here, and also b8 queen at the same time? It looks like I have to give back some material. And there could be potential threats with pawn at e6 if I cover the mate here as well. Yeah, I mean, for example, bishop at f7, he could change plans, and then pawn at e6, and I think this spells trouble for black. Okay, so in the game I played the move bishop at h5. Computer is calling for queen at e8. Okay, zero comment on this move. It's not a human move. So bishop at e5 at h5. Alright, and now the point of his previous 5 or 6 moves is so he can play queen at b3 check and pawn b8 queen. Alright, now here I'm going into total shell mode. I'm saying please don't hurt me. Bishop e7. Taking a pawn, keeping the queens on the board. Yes, that makes some sense. There's drops. I just can't cover everything. Pawn drop on e6 and d6. Trying to get some counterplay over here, but the problem is if the bishop ever moves away, he's got pawn drop in, knight drop, checkmate. So yeah, there's no reasonable moves left for black. I played knight at d4, and again the next move just totally shocked me. I thought, since this here is a real queen, right? This is the real queen. He's promoted this queen here and gone to c7 with the fake queen. This is the fake queen. So if I take it, I don't get a queen in hand, I just get a pawn. So, I mean, surely any human player would save their real queen. But in the game he goes queen takes e5. I just couldn't believe my eyes when I saw this move. Alright, no comment, no comment. Knight takes queen, pawn at d6. Okay, now I get the point. Forcing a move like knight g8, take there, pawn at d6 again. Alright, I'm running out of pieces to defend. Now I have to drop a queen, or block the e file. Could I have done that last turn? No, because I didn't have a pawn in hand for e6. Okay. Alright, pawn at e6, taking on g7. And suddenly the threat of knight c7 is just about insurmountable. Of course, other threats as well, and dropping knights everywhere. So I just fell for a mate in one because I was so shocked to lose the game in this fashion. All right, let's move on. Round 15, I'm now on 10 points out of 14. And to get a high place, I have to win the last game because I'm currently in 5th position. And to get equal third, I had to win the last game. So it's an all-important round. As it turned out with the disqualifications, the victory here between myself and HighContrast. Welcome to the video, because I'm sure he's watching this. He even asked me to make some comments on this game so he can learn a tip or two. So just before I introduce HighContrast, I was going to say the difference here between a win and a loss in the final round is the difference between equal 5th losing and outright 3rd place winning with the disqualifications. Okay, so JannLee and myself, and also Master Tan and Bugzilla, had the pleasure of meeting HighContrast in Sydney last year in about July. There are some Bughouse videos on JannLee's website, on his YouTube channel, which you're welcome to look at, which are very entertaining. JannLee does a bit of commentary. We're playing 5-0, and the idea there was so we can win the games on the board. So we're all used to playing 1 or 2 minute games online, where just about every game ends in a silly time scramble where we're just checking and avoiding checks and pre-moving and so on. And over the board, it was a lot more fun to make the focus more into partner coordination, to accurate play, precise attacks and defense, and working together with your partner, using a time advantage, which is really how the game should be played. I also enjoy 3 minutes over the board. 2 minutes is getting a little bit too fast for me, because I'm not as young as I used to be. I've been playing Bughouse for about 20 years. But yeah, 3 minutes or 5 minutes, I'm quite happy with either. Anyway, back to the game. So this is the final round of the 2018 Chess.com Crazyhouse Championships. So white against HighContrast. I was expecting e4, e5, and bishop c5. We've played this many times. Castle, knight f6, knight c3, d3, d6. So one first point of advice is that when you're playing a very important round which decides the final placings, do not play a line which is a forced loss for black. Sounds like sensible advice. But no, the line that we're going to play has been known for over a year, and I think that Bugzilla was either the first or one of the first to play this line, discover this line, and play it in tournaments. So Bugzilla also from Australia, from Sydney. And yeah, I'll show you when we get up to the key moment, but I mean, there's some other options here. You can throw in the move h6. You can bring the bishop back to e7. Some people like to go knight g4 or king h8 at the right time, just to confuse the opponent and at least play a line that's not so well known as a forced loss for black. So d6, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, bishop g4. I mean, some people also try king h8 here, bishop e6 here as some alternatives. But bishop g4, knight d5. This is a very well-trodden path. It's been played many times. Actually, just for interest's sake, let's see how many times it's been played. So I'm going to go to the openings book here. It's just loading up. So this position has been played over 3,000 times, as you can see here. Well, let's keep going. So, of course, most popular move is to sacrifice the queen. Otherwise, no, but black is just getting into a lot of trouble after knight takes here and knight drop on d5 and so on. h3 trading also favors white. Alright, so take there, take the queen, rook takes, Bishop takes knight is obvious. Now, by far the main move is bishop at h5. And bishop takes c6 because white really wants as many pieces in hand as possible. And at this moment in time, there's not so much pressure on the diagonal here, especially with bishop at h5 being played. So white wants as many attacking pieces to drop on these squares here as possible to set up mating threats. So bishop takes c6 is the main move. Now I'm going to show you a bombshell here. If you haven't seen it before, there's the line pawn takes c6 followed by knight to g5. This is very well known to be winning for white. It's an absolute shock if you haven't seen it before, but obvious point, there's a mate in one threat. If the knight is taken, there's another bombshell move coming next. Are you ready for it? Knight at f6 check. Wow, what a move. G takes is forced. Now the point here is to clear the square h6 for the queen, setting up simultaneous threats of knight at e7 mate, and also queen takes bishop followed by bishop dropping immediately back on the board on h7, and then discover check bishop g6 and queen h7 checkmate. And it turns out there is just no good defense for black. You have to sacrifice a lot of material if you want to survive. It's funny that bishop at g7 has been played 9 times with a 100% score for white. Guess why? Knight at e7 mate. Bishop at e7 may be possible. Knight at g6, but it's just all good for white. Now black has to cover the square here. Perhaps knight at h7, something like this. But yeah, it's just all good news for white. All right, so that was a bit of Crazyhouse theory. And also, what happened in the game HighContrast played? Bishop takes f3. But it's also quite well known that this check is very good for white. Now, I only really know the move king h8, which you can see is the more popular move. And just the main line here would go queen takes bishop. And the point is to clear this square for another knight drop, deflecting the bishop here. So knight at g6 check. It doesn't really matter whether you take it or run the king. It's all good for white. So take their check. Rook takes, queen dropping back on the board on f5. Now you can see there's no pawn or bishop to drop back on g6. I don't think g6 is possible. What happens here? Would you just go queen takes bishop? If there's no forced mate, what happens? Yeah, I mean, of course you'd like time to play bishop at f6, and I'm not sure whether black can really generate anything too threatening. In the meantime, so what happens here? Let's say queen h3. Yeah, there's no mates. What happens after knight at f4? Can I just take the knight here on h4? Yeah, so queen covers f2. And this doesn't lead to anything after king h1. And yeah, there's knight at f6 to follow. I hope I'm not missing anything. Knight at f3 is possible. And queen takes here. Now, I meant to know this theory, so I hope I don't have to rewind, but let's see if we can finish off with bishop at f6, noting that there's no check for black, and black has to deal with the threat of rook at g7. Now, of course, the problem with two queens in hand is that you probably have to return one of the queens immediately. I mean, rook g8 just doesn't help. I'll take it and threaten mate. Maybe even better to go knight at f8, but anyway. Yeah, it must be just lost for black after queen drops somewhere. Wherever you go, I'll just take it. And with more threats to come. Hope I'm not missing anything here. Now, yeah, one of the points is as soon as white has a knight in hand, that there's also threats with a knight dropping on f6, followed by a rook here, knight back to d5, and so on. Yeah, so where are we up to? Yeah, main line goes knight at g6 here, but then you can actually take it, allow knight check on e2, bishop sack. I mean, it looks like black is winning. The point is you can't drop a knight on these squares without allowing a counter check after this knight takes. So yeah, you got moves like pawn at h3, pawn at f3. I don't know. It's known to be good for white. Well, of course, white has to be very precise. Let's see if I can find the right move. Queen takes f3. Is that okay? This is covered for the moment. Pawn takes knight. And we just follow up hammering away on g6. Yeah, pawn at f5 looks good. Knight at h4, king h1. And if you take here, yeah, white's just got too much material in hand and can keep dropping pieces with check. The white will just continue to drop pieces with check until mate. And yeah, pawn takes or knight takes is also possible. Alright, what do we have here? Can we just go pawn takes? Yeah, just keep hammering away on g6. Yeah, it should be a win for white here. Of course, you're very welcome to check this with the openings book and with the engine to make sure I'm not making a mistake, but hopefully what I'm saying is accurate. Pawn at h3. I think he can even just take with the king. And tricky move, queen at h5, hoping for queen takes and knight at f4 check and recapturing the queen. But here, white... Let me think what happens next. Or do you take here? Is this just good for... oh yeah, that's right. King g4 is the key move. Yep. So now, yeah, if black takes here, white starts with a check until mate. Yeah, and any other move, white's just going to have way too much material and is threatening here. Queen drop on h7. Okay, that just about covers everything. So... Alright, in the actual game, HighContrast played the move King h7. Alright, so white to play. And I thought now was a good time to drop a queen at f5 and to sack the queen back for two bishops. And it turns out white's already got a material advantage. The attack continues. Well, black can avoid a forced mate for a while. And he made a good move, queen h4. I was actually expecting knight takes e7. And I don't know, if you're rated in Crazyhouse, say between 1800 and 2500, this might be a very good time to pause the video and see if you can find a convincing victory for white from here. So I'm just going to stop talking for a few seconds. Alright, so it's actually a very interesting puzzle and not that easy. So the most convincing line for white is to firstly drop a knight on g5. You'd expect the king to cover f7 with king g8. And it turns out the most convincing move and the real cruncher here for white is to play the move bishop at f6. So very well done if you found this move. It's an attempt to deflect the g pawn away from h6. So just as an example, pawn takes, queen takes, and there is just no way for black to cover the squares here and stop queen h7 or bishop at h7 checkmate. And what else? I mean, what else can black do here? If he takes the knight, there's going to be bishop at h7, king there, bishop out of the way. Now the knight has to drop somewhere, and yeah, because of this bishop on f6, can't drop there because of checkmate to follow. Using the pin in this position here. Now if black does some nothing move, I don't know, let's say takes back the bishop, then the point is now to take on h6 and threatening pawn at h7 checkmate. So yeah, something like this, pawn at h7, and otherwise there's just too many squares to cover. So this is a convincing win for white and a real cruncher, a smasher. Bishop at f6. I was hoping for something like this in the game, but didn't happen. Queen at h4, black is surviving. Let's continue. Queen takes, knight takes. Just pausing for a moment. I hope it's clear that black has a decisive threat here with knight at h3. So I can't just do any move, even though white is certainly better at the moment. I do have to be very careful to guard the squares, either h3 or f2. Bishop at g3 it just seems a little bit too passive, and possibly allowing knight at e3 taking at the right time. And bishop at h3. Also, I thought the best move was to keep pressing on the light squares. So I played the move bishop at f5. I think this is the best move for white. He has to block or take. Can't move. Well, I don't think pawn g6 is possible because of knight check, queen there, knight back to d5. So he took, I took with a pawn, and you can see my pawns are just creeping closer and closer and trying to take over this square g6. There's very few options for black at this stage. Bishop at h5. I quite like this move, bishop to f3, trying to deflect the bishop from h5. Just to demonstrate he can't take. Bishop at g6, take, followed by queen at h7 checkmate. And so he has to keep guarding the squares g6 and h7. No easy way to do that at this stage. So knight at h3, he gets a check, but blocking on g3 forces the queens off the board again. And it's a typical Crazyhouse theme that you would like to trade queens favoring your position, and this capture here just doesn't allow any more drops with check. So that's the point of the queen dropping on g3. Alright, so he takes on e7, take on h5. Again, just trying to dominate these light squares and infiltrate. Knight at f4. And here, the main thing is just not to allow any counterplay. So there's any number of ways to go on to win, but I just want to make sure all these squares here are covered. That's why I'm playing a safe move, bishop at f3. And I think it's also the best move for white. King h8, knight at e4. I don't really want to take the bishop. The main point is to set up some f6 move and dropping on g7. So take there, bishop there, and you can see how black is trying to make sure I don't get in this f6 break. But I can put a knight on the board and control f6 again. In the meantime, driving the queen away, so queen e8. And now is the right time for f6. So now there is just absolutely no counterplay left for black. Take, pawn there. Grab the queen, why not? Take there, bishop at f6, and bishop at g7. So that is it. So take there, knight at f5, queen drop to follow. The only other choice was queen here. And where is my finish? Knight at f6, take there. how do I want to do this? Is that really, mate? Oh, it'll be so embarrassing to stumble in the last moment. There's a faster way to do this, I'm sure. Can I take twice? I can drop there. I have bungled this completely, and I would like to take my move back, please. I was looking at stuff like queen. Nah, let's go back. What would I do? I mean, I've even got e2 covered. So in a real game, if I don't see a force mate, I'd probably just take on h6 or take on f6. Why not? Where is the fastest mate? Take on f6, threatening queen here. He's got to cover this square, so it's either bishop there or rook g8, something like this. Now, can we find a cutesy mate? A cutesy mate to finish off? So this is the last game. Let's see if we can find a cutesy mate to finish off. Knight at g5, sacking a queen. Can we do it that way? Can we drop something here or here? Yeah, I also want to take on g6. If rook takes, I'll definitely sack a queen there, or drop a queen back on g7. So pawn take seems forced, and then the finish is queen at f7. Drop there, queen takes, and finish with a smothered mate. All right, so yeah, bishop at f6, bishop takes f6, and I probably would have done this in the game just to be safe. Spotting that the bishop covers the knight, drop on e2 with check. Okay, so that ended the tournament. I finished on 11 out of 15, which gave me outright third place. And just finally, I'd like to say huge thanks to chess.com for putting on the event, raising the prize money, and to everybody who competed. It was a really fun, exciting event. I hope there's many more of these in the future on both Lichess and chess.com. They're really excellent websites for chess, all variants of chess. So I hope to see you there soon. And I'm about to start my first match on Sunday in the Lichess World Crazyhouse Championship. So I hope to see you soon. Thanks for watching.